Hey guys, Eden here. We're going to have now a very quick introduction of pytest and pytest features. So we're going to do this by using very simple examples, and we're going to discover those features in a very shallow way. Now don't worry, we're going to go in depth on each feature and much more features in the rest of this course, but this is just an introduction video so you get the idea of what is pytest offering us. In this video, we're going to quickly review the pytest test runner, we're going to review markers, parameterized, and fixtures. So I remind you again, this is an introduction video, and we're going to go much more advanced and we're going to review complex topics later in this course. So I'm going to create a new directory and I'm going to call it gist because we're going to discuss the gist of pytest here. Now I'll open and I'll create a Python file which is called testgist.py. This file is going to be holding a bunch of tests that are going to help us discover and explore pytest and pytest features. Now, we're going to discover those features of pytest in a very shallow way. We're doing this for the sake of the introduction, and we'll have plenty of time to dive in deep and to see how those features are implemented and even implement them ourselves in the next couple of hours of this course. Okay, so notice here that we called our file testgist.py. And notice the test prefix. Now we call this file with the test prefix because that's the way pytest is going to discover our test files. By default, when pytest is looking for tests to run, it is looking for files with their names ending or starting with test. So that's why we called it test underscore, because we wanted to make sure that pytest is going to pick up our test file. So as a side note, this behavior we see here is configurable. So if we really want, we can configure pytest to be searching for other files. So we can define another string that pytest will search the file names for, and it will search those files for tests. However, for now we're going to be sticking with the regular conventions. Okay, so now it's time to create our first pytest test. So I'm going to create now a new function which is going to be called test our first test. Now notice that this function name is starting with test, and this is because we want pytest to pick up this function and to mark it as a test function and run it. And it's going to return none, and simply we're going to assert in here that 1 is going to be equals to 2. Now 1 is not equals to 2, so this test is going to fail. So now let's see how we're going to run this test. So we're going to open up our terminal and we're going to head up to our project's location, and inside it we're going to be writing ppenv shell. So we want to activate the virtual environment and we want to run pytest from our virtual environment we created earlier. So this is my virtual environment. Now I want pytest to run all my tests in my project. So I'm going to be writing pytest and then I'm going to write dot. And dot is telling to pytest to go over from the current working directory, which is my pytest course right now. And we can change this argument to pytest to be any kind of file if you want to run tests in a specific file. And we'll see this behavior later in this course. So to conclude, pytest now is going to be looking for tests and test files that are nested under our current working directory. So I'm going now to see the result now, and we see over here that we failed our test. And this is the test we failed, and we see exactly why we failed it. Now let's go back and change it to 1, and we'll run everything again. And we can see now that our test successfully passed. Now, if we take a look at this output over here, it is not very informative. We can see over here that we ran stuff from testgist.py, but we don't see the tests. We can see now a green dot which is going to represent that pytest ran one test and it's green, so it means it passed. But we don't see the name of the test and we don't have any information. So I want to fix that, and I even want pytest to be more specific. I want to tell pytest to run only tests from testgist.py file, and I want to have a verbose output for my test run. So I'm going to be writing pytest again. However, now I'm going to specify the path of our test file. So this is going to be with the testgist.py, and now I'm going to add the flag of -v for verbose output. So now when we'll run this test, then we'll see that we have much more details. We can see the name of the test which ran, and we can see if it passed or failed, and this is much clearer, and this is a verbose output, and this is what we're going to do from now. So now I want to introduce skipping. So let's say there's a test that we want to skip it, and there may be many reasons why we would want to skip a test. For example, maybe if we have a test that is failing because we introduced a bug and the bug won't be fixed soon. So we don't want to erase the test and to lose the data and all the work we've put in to write the test, but we want to skip it. So we want pytest not to run this test until this bug is fixed. So for that, we have the pytest mark skip, which tells pytest not to run the test and to skip it. We can even specify to pytest the reason we want to skip this test, and it will display this reason while running all our tests. It will say, hey, I'm going to skip this test because, and then it's going to describe what we have put in. But we'll see this behavior later in this course. So now we're going to be writing a test which is called test should be skipped. And in this test, we're going to put a false assertion. So if this test would run, it would fail. And we're going to be using the pytest.mark.skip. Pytest mark is simply pytest way to tag a test with a certain value. And we'll see this very, very soon. Now skip is a built-in mark which tells pytest to skip a test. So now we're going to put here the false assertion, 1 is equals to 2, and it's not. And we want now to import pytest. And now I want to just make my code a little bit prettier, so I'm going to format it. Now don't worry about what I did now with the formatting, we'll discover it later in this course. So I want now to run our tests, and we can see right over here that we have an unconditional skip and that we skipped the test should be skipped. We can see from the output that we collected 2 test items, and 1 passed, 1 was skipped, and the duration was 0.02 seconds. So now let's check out what's a conditional skip. So I'm going to be pasting this snippet over here, and we have this test should be skipped if, and we're going to assert in it that 1 is equals to 2, so of course it would fail if it would run. And we're going to use the skipif decorator, which is again a built-in pytest mark to skip a test with a certain condition. So in the first argument of this decorator, we feed it with a Boolean condition. 4 is greater than 1. And if this condition is met and valued to true, then we will skip this test. We then pass to the decorator the reason argument, which is going to hold the string why we want to skip this step. And here is because skipped because 4 is greater than 1. And if we'll go and run now our tests, we can see very, very clearly that we skipped because 4 was greater than 1, and that test was skipped. So now, if we'll just go back to our code, so let's now just put here a condition which will be evaluated to false, and now this won't be skipped. And we can see now when we ran our tests, then our test failed. And this is because our skipping condition evaluated to false. So we ran this test and it failed because 1 is not equals to 2. So now it's time to talk about xfail. Xfail is also a default marker that comes out of the box when we install pytest. We usually use the xfail marker when we have tests that we are okay with them of failing. So let's say we have a test which is a flaky test, and I know it doesn't pass all the time. Now, instead of wanting to skip it, then I still want to run it. However, I don't want it to fail our test suite when it fails. So this is exactly the use case when we use xfail. So if we'll just paste this snippet over here, we have here a test that's called test don't care if it fails. And we can see here we have the mark.xfail. And this tells pytest that it's okay that if this test will fail, we don't want to fail our test run. So if we'll just run it, we can see here in the test output that we have 1 xfailed, and we can see that the status is xfail and that the entire run passed successfully. Now let's change the assert to 1 equals 1, so this test will pass. And if we'll run again our test suite, we can see that it's marked now xpass. So we discussed now some built-in markers which are commonly used. Now a super cool feature of pytest is that we can create markers ourselves. So we can create custom markers to categorize our tests. So for example, if I have a test which I consider it as a slow test, I can mark it as a slow test. So this is a very elegant way to tag tests of certain categories or in certain tags. And if we'll go to the pytest runner, and we'll now run our tests, we can see that everything passed. However, we do get here a warning, and this is because we need to register our slow mark in the pytest configuration. To do that, we need to edit a file which is called pytest.ini file, which is a file which is going to hold our pytest configurations. However, we're not going to do it now. We will do it later in this course. For now, what we want to do, and it will be enough, we just want to ignore this warning. So I'm going to add the -p flag, and I'm going to add no warnings. So now we can see that after running it, we will hide the warnings and we will suppress them and won't show them. So now if we only want to run the slow test, we can add the -n flag and with the slow mark. So this will run only the tests that are tagged as slow, which are with the slow mark. Now we can take a look that pytest did recognize all our tests, however it deselected 4 and chose to run only the tests with the mark slow. To emphasize this, I just created a duplicate test which is called test with custom mark 2. And now let's go back and run everything again with the mark slow. And we can see over here we ran out 2 tests with this mark. And we can even add the not slow, and this will run all the tests which are not marked with the slow mark. So we can see over here we collected 6, though we deselected 2 tests, which are the tests that are marked slow.